Well, you join me today at the wheel of something a little bit weird. It's 3 seats wide and 2 rows back. It's not a Fiat Multipla, it's a Honda FR-V.
Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk.
Hello, welcome back to Furious Driving, and today we're driving, well, a bit of an oddity. Now, not that long ago, certainly within living memory, the default choice for a family car wasn't an SUV. Now, I've got it down pretty hard on SUVs, with good reason. Unless you're buying a full-size SUV, say a Discovery, an XC90, a Cayenne, a Q7, you're basically just buying a fat Astra. But go back a few years to the sort of early part of the millennium, and if you wanted to move people, you bought a people carrier, or an MPV, which was a really practical solution because it's car-sized, but it's massive inside. There were loads of them: Zafira, C-Max, Renault Scenic, all kinds of things. But most of those came in 2 configurations of seats, either 5 seats, which for a big family isn't enough, or 7 seats, which many people felt was an extravagance. Who wants 7 seats? You're just showing off with you. 7 seats. The best number of seats is 6. So said 2 companies, Fiat and Honda. And this, the Honda FR-V, is a 6-seater. So from 2004 to 2011, Honda built this, the FR-V, or EDIX in Japan, which is this 6-seater MPV. So it's got 2 rows of 3 individual chairs. So it's kind of like the Multipla, but normal looking. And you can take this as a positive or a negative if you're a Multipla fan. Now, there was no precedent for this car. There's nothing in the Honda lineup which gave way to become the FR-V. And when they killed it in 2011, there's nothing that followed it either. So for this brief period, this thing was available, and people with large families, Siamese twins, Mormons, they loved this thing, they lap it up. So even now, 9 years after they went out of production, there is still strong demand for them. People who know them love them. They're a bit like Subaru owners, in that having had one, they would go and look for another one if they wear the first one out somehow. It's a Honda, they don't wear out easily, obviously. When the car was launched in 2004, you had the choice of 2 petrol engines, the 1.7 litre 129 horsepower VTEC or the 2 litre 150 horsepower iVTEC. And in 2005, you gained the option of the 2.2 litre ICDTI thing diesel, which only made 140 horsepower but an astonishing 340 newton meters of torque. In 2007, they gave the car a facelift and they rationalised the engines, so they dropped the 1.7 and the 2 litre, and the only option was this 1.8 from the 8th generation Civic, which makes 138 horsepower and 174 newton meters of torque. I think we've talked enough about engines now. Let's look inside. Well, the inside of the Honda is very well Honda, in so much as it's well thought out, but just a little bit different to usual. So we have got a very wide dashboard. The car looks like it's going to be incredibly wide. It's kind of a big square squat shape, and you've got the 3 full seats running side by side. So your first thought is, wow, this is going to be a wide car. But in fact, it's only about as wide as a Renault Scenic of the same year. So not as wide as you might think. I'm not quite sure how they've managed to squeeze 6 seats in side by side. Well, let's look around us and see what we've got. Well, first of all, the doors. If you look at this door, let's turn that off because that's really beepy and quite annoying. This door, because the car is so tall, the door obviously is tall as well. But this door card seems to go on forever. They've made it not look so tall though by clever use of colour. The top part of the door is carpeted in a nice soft touch but hard wearing fabric, like a carpet almost. And that extends into the armrests on both front doors as well. So you've got a nice soft place for your elbow to sit. There's not much door furniture to talk about in here. We've got a little metal door handle and a plastic central locking nubbin up here, kind of probably hidden from you by the steering wheel. Then in front of the door pull, we've got our electric mirror switches, a little round flat joypad. Then we move across to the dashboard, and it's okay, only as wide as the car, but it seems to go on forever. I literally cannot touch the windscreen bottom from the driver's seat. It's just such a lot of dashboard going on. And when you look at that big gap behind the engine, you think, well, where's the space gone? Because they could have made this a bit bigger inside the cabin if they really wanted to. Now it's lots of kind of floating levels and layers and angles and all kinds of stuff going on. So the top is a softish touch elephant hide top, which has got a central screen in it for your clock and your radio things for all the car to see. Now below that we've got a large carbon fibre strip. This is part of the 2007 update to the car, when the car got a darker front grille and this carbon fibre trim and a few other minor changes. And that's got the 4 main air vents and the radio kind of built into the whole dashboard with the carbon fibre fascia for the radio and the CD player. Because, you know, 2005 through 11, CDs were still a thing. Well, there's 2 more things to mention about the dashboard area. We've got the little tweeters up here in the top of the dash, and there's a lay post window so you can sort of see through into the blind spot. We'll see how effective they are when we get on the road. Now we've got the dials. It's a very, very Honda-y layout. First of all, it's all kind of semicircular and interlocking, like a Venn diagram of information. So in the centre we've got the speedo, and as I say, it's not a circle, it's a semicircle rising from 0 to 140. And then interlocking behind that, we've got the rev counter on the left rising up to red line at 6,750, and then the twin needles of heat and fuel in the right hand gauge cluster. And moving backwards towards ourselves, we've got our stalks. Headlights and fog lights on the left hand stalk, and many, many, many wiper controls on the right hand stalk. So many wiper controls. So many wiper controls. Now to the right hand side of the steering wheel, we've got a plethora of buttons. These are almost like flat toggle switches. There's a panel of 4 of them, which are unlabeled, but common sense would suggest they are our window switches because they're not on the door. There aren't many cars that have their electric window switches mounted on the dashboard. I guess this saves with the amount of cabling and wiring that has to sort of go through into the moving parts of the doors. Maybe that's more practical, maybe it's more hard wearing. And underneath that we've got our headlamp levelling dial and the VSA off switch, which I'm going to say is vehicle stability control. Now the steering wheel, it's a nice large leather thing. It doesn't look large, but it feels large, if that makes any kind of sense, which I know it doesn't. It's also got all the buttons for this cruise control and the radio. Now moving back into the centre of this kind of massively wide floating console, because it is a 3-seater. You see I'm using it as an armrest right now, but we'll come talk about that in a second. This is a 3-seater. Now to make room for the middle passenger's legs, there's no centre console down here. So what we have here is a sticking out ledge almost. There's kind of a T-shelf, which we'll talk more about in a second. On this top silver surface, we've got our heating and ventilation controls, heated mirrors, heated rear window, all that kind of stuff. And then as it flattens off towards you, we've got more controls. First of all, we've got a hazard warning light switch. Nice and central, easy to find. A tiny, tiny cubby hole, which is ideal for hand sanitizer these days. Way too small for anything other than a Motorola StarTAC if you're going to stick your mobile phone in there. 2 rocker switches here for multi-stage heated front seats. So the 2 outer passengers get heated seats. The poor schmuck in the middle, they have to make do with a cold bum. I guess they just have to hope that the warm elbows of their more toasty companions can keep them warm in winter. Now on the right hand side of this area, you'll notice this large jutting out item, which is the gear shifter, 6-speed manual. Because there's no space on the floor or a floor console, it's coming out of the dash, which I think they do in Civics as well. So it's kind of an established Honda trope going on just there. On the left hand side of this, obviously the front seat passenger doesn't get a gear stick of their own. That would be weird. They do get another air vent, so I guess you can have the 2 upper air vents for the outer passengers and the central air vent for the middle passenger. Now underneath here we've got a couple more cubbies and storages. There's an ashtray, another cup holder, we're going to say another because there's a lot just there, and a couple of sockets. There's a 12-volt power just up at the top and an aux in down at the bottom, and then the handbrake. Because they've had to find an inventive place to stick a handbrake because there's no floor, either you can go on the right hand side like you did on things like Wolseley's back in the old days, which are horrible to use, or you go for a foot brake like a Mercedes, and everyone hates them, so they haven't, because it's a manual and you want to have clutch control. So you've got this weird pulley outy, like an umbrella handbrake, but not quite, but just kind of strange. So yeah, this got many comments on reviews back in the day when these cars were new. Now let's talk about the seating configuration of this thing. This car may be considered the ultimate T-shelf, because you'll notice that I'm now using the central seat as an armrest. It also doubles up as a large table, so I can put a notebook, a cup, anything else, an iPad in this big centre section. If I wanted to use this car as like a mobile office, this would be a good place to put a laptop even. And you've got 2 carbon fibre cupboard, or pretend carbon fibre cupboard, little folder areas, which have got twin cup holders in each one, so masses of T-shelf going on there in terms of cup holderage, and a large T-shelf area in the centre for any kind of buffet items you want to place down here. So that's a major T-shelf in the front centre first of all, but of course you won't always have that, because sometimes you're going to put the seat up. So what else have you got? Well, as I say, there's a cup holder down here in the centre, then we have a large dashboard up here on the left hand side, which is just flat enough to put some food on, so we can have a large T-shelf picnic area up there. This area here is also very big and very deep. You can continue to have your picnic up here, so you can start with sandwiches to the left, maybe some kind of cold cuts in the middle, and then over to cake on the right, and of course you have your drink selection and dips in the middle. So we're fully sorted for picnics. There should also be a glove box down there, but the handle broke, so we won't talk about that right now. Now let's talk about the foldy seat. Now apparently there are 32 seating configurations with this car, which is a lot, so I'm not going to go through all of them. So first of all, we've seen the table arrangement. We now know what that's like. Obviously you want to be taking your cups out the cup holders before you do that, otherwise you're going to be making a bit of a mess and annoying some people in the back. Then you've got 3 seats. Well, that's great, except you are very much elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, and hey, there is yet another bit of storage in here, a large tray which pulls out from under that centre seat. But no, that wasn't what I was going for. I was going for this handle here, so you can slide that seat back so that the people in the front aren't pushing their elbows into each other. It's a bit more personal space. Oops. Of course, that's not all you can use. You can also use it as yet another tray to extend your picnicking abilities. There's more storage down in there as well. So much space. Oh, and to pull the seat down again, thus hiding some of the rather pleasant leather which this car is clad in. Back to our big table again. Now, let's have a look in the back where there are yet more seating arrangements. Now, so I parked in a hedge, that was a silly thing to do. Round the back is really, really, really big. The car is obviously very tall and very square. The hip or shoulder, as it's sometimes known of the car, doesn't kind of fold in for style as a lot of cars do to make it narrower in the glass area. It stays square and tall all the way up, so your shoulder room is huge. It's also really tall, so it's like a big square box, which is the perfect shape for carrying things, including people. So the headroom is excellent. Now, once again, we've got lots of clever folding seats happening, so the 3 seats normally can sit square across. If the front seat passenger is back, or if you just want to have a bit more personal space of your own in the back and not rub shoulder to shoulder, this middle seat also, like the front one, slides backwards and forwards. Also, the seats all fold forward and tip forward to make tons more space in the boot, and you've got an armrest here as well if you really want it. And the doors are great big door pockets with big kind of bottle holding, cup holdery things in them, and we've got big storage bin things in the back of the front seats, and of course it's all this nice tan leather back here as well. Obviously not every car's going to have nice tan leather. That's a nice thing here. I think that's the back of the car. Let's have a look in the boot. Now, the front of the car is fairly conventional, but camera in the back, and there's a nice bit of Honda weirdness going on with this big curved glass tinted black back end. So it's quite a cool, funky, bit different. It's got IV Tech stock on it on a sticker, which is now coming off. And look at this massive, massive wiper. I have to admit that when you're driving, that is a tiny bit intrusive, but the entire back of the car is glass from there upwards to there downwards. So there's nowhere else to park it really. It's not a clever cantilever or pantograph, it's just a wipey wipe. And considering how big this blade is, the actual wiper is fairly small because there's only a relatively small flat area here in the middle. Now, here in the boot, it is basically a boot. You've got a carpet with a Honda rubber liner over it, which has got a cutout in the bottom so the seat can fold back into it, and then you've got a load space cover like many other cars, but not just any other car, because this one has got a cutout in it as well. It's in 3 sections, so if this seat moves forwards and backwards, the load space cover moves forwards and backwards as well. Now, in terms of boot space, it's pretty decent because it's a 6-seater, not a 7-seater, and the seats are wide, not going backwards. The boot is really deep. It's almost like a bigger than a regular hatchback, not quite as big as a state car, but kind of somewhere in between, and it's very tall as well, so better than most SUVs too, so you get the best of every world really with this kind of compromise. Push that seat forward in the middle, you've got a ton of space back here, so you can carry 6 bodies in the seats, and if you want to put a few more in the back, there's a ton of space for, I reckon you could get 3 or so if you're going on a bit of a spree. Now, when I first started looking at this car, I assumed it was going to feel really, really wide to drive. I mean, the Giulia felt really wide because it was so low and had got a massive body kit. The Rover SD1 felt really wide because it's quite wide. This though doesn't feel wide at all. I'm surprised. Maybe it's because you're so high up, your driving position is pretty well raised. You're sitting fairly upright, almost like a dining chair arrangement, so that your feet aren't out in front of you, they're more or less below you, as if you were sitting in a chair at home. And even though you're sitting well up off the ground, you kind of climb straight into this car, you don't get down into it, you do still have a lot of room above you. The glass area is just absolutely enormous. When they talk about the greenhouse on a car being the glass area, but this does feel like you're in a greenhouse. It's so open. Now, visibility is interesting because you've got an amazing straight-on view because it's great big almost wrap-around window. Looking in the mirror behind me, because of that wrap-around tailgate, you can see out the back really clearly as well. Well, you do have interruptions from the central seatbelt strap sort of hanging down the middle, and also from the big slash of the rear wiper. And to the side, I've got a fairly good view, but off to the corner, especially off to my left-hand corner away from me, the A-post, even though it's got that little window in it, is just enormous. And if it's on a tight corner with hedges and things, it's virtually impossible to see what's going on over to the left of you. Fortunately though, the overhangs are pretty short. The bonnet is, well, the bonnet's about half the length of the dashboard, it feels, and obviously it's not. Don't pick me up on that. They've done a great job of making the controls very light and easy and accessible so that pretty much anyone can drive one of these cars. The 6-speed manual is easy to just kind of dance through the flick of a finger. It's in a great position because up high on the dashboard you can sort of rest your arm on the armrest, and it's just there in front of your hand. You barely have to take your hand off the steering wheel, you can almost do it. But you can do it. From third to fourth with your hand. Can you do third to fifth? Yes. Fourth to fifth with your hand on the steering wheel. And back again. So yeah, the controls are all very easy, very accessible. And the brakes are pretty good, although they should be. Chris, who helped me out with the alternator and timing belt on the Rover convertible not so long ago, actually changed the rears on this not so long ago. Steering is like super light. Oh, I'm going to regret making this turn. Oh God. And so are the pedals, although the clutch is a little heavy. So it's a really easy car to drive, for anyone really. And the ride on this thing is quite soft, it's a little bit bouncy, and it kind of rolls a little into corners. But it does soak up the bumps nicely, so the passengers are not sort of thrown about and made to feel ill or unpleasant. It's generally a nice place to be, and it feels so big and so airy. Now, one thing which may be less good, you might imagine, for a car designed purely to carry people is the Euro end cap. You would think a car designed exclusively for that would be beyond reproach and have the best possible end cap score you could imagine, but no. Instead of having a 5-star end cap, it's only got a 4-star. Surprising, huh? At first I thought there was no airbag for the middle passenger, but in fact the two passengers to the left of the driver share a double airbag. So Honda do seem to like their RV the naming system, because they've got the CRV, the HRV, and this, the FRV. Now it normally stands for something recreational vehicle. I think the HRV, which is a little kind of tiny SUV, is like something like a happy recreational vehicle. The CRV is apparently the comfy recreational vehicle. So I assume this is the functional recreational vehicle. I'm joking, it's actually the flexible recreational vehicle. Performance is pretty much exactly what you expect from a big brick powered by a 1.8. 0 to 60 is 10.3 seconds, it'll do 118 miles an hour, and the MPG is around 37. It's quite a fun car to throw around really, the controls being so light, and it's got, you know, pretty respectable performance for a car of this size, so you can actually enjoy driving the thing quite well really. In 2009, a 6-seat concept called the Skydeck was shown by Honda, with seats that hung from the ceiling, but it never made production, and so there was no successor to the FRV. This is an interestingly practical car. It's amazing what you can do with this particular configuration. So the average family is probably 4 or 5 people, but there are bigger families. Football teams, families with friends over for their kids, sports coaches. There are often times you're going to have to move more than 5 people, but you don't want a full-on 7-seater the whole time. And it's not really a compromise in terms of handling dynamics or size of the vehicle, so it almost seems strange that more people haven't designed cars this way. And it does feel quite sprightly on the road. It does roll a bit into the corners, but you know, it's a very tall car, so it's kind of to be expected. One thing you do notice about Honda owners is that, like Subaru owners, they come back for more, whether it's the same model with the newer version or just trading up through the sizes up from a Civic to an Accord or to one of these. Honda customers are fiercely loyal, so I guess Honda are doing something right. And the thing is, it's just a very pleasant car to drive. You're not sacrificing drivability for what the comfort and practicality is. Well, thank you for joining me today at the wheel of this rather interesting little 6-seater Honda. It's been an interesting ride. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and join me again next time for something completely different.